Howdy, 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 my name is Anachi Sasuke, and welcome back to Reading the Nightmare Fuel for Star Wars. When I started doing this yesterday, I didn't know it was going to take me through the movies and the TV shows and the video games, and I don't even know how many video games it's taking me through. It seems to just be going in chronological order. So I don't know if it's going to cover the Boba Fett game. I don't know if it's going to cover the Battlefront games for some reason. It might. But I won't know until I get to the bottom of this page, will I? So, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which I'm actually installing to my Xbox right now so I can get points for it, but it's not fun enough to beat it. Anyway, at the beginning of the game, Cal and his coworkers have to dismantle a Republic flagship that crashed down above a giant pit. Not just any pit, but the mouth of a Sarlacc-like creature known as the Ibtis Maw. If you fall, you won't die from the fall, but getting eaten by a giant creature, which is almost what happens to Cal's coworker on site, Prouf, when an accident causes the working platform to tip over. It's stated that the Maw is actually one superorganism stretching over the entire planet, with the pit in-game simply being one of its many mouths. The Breaker Yard of Braca is nightmarish enough even without the Maw. The Empire's tendency towards no OSHA compliance is in full effect here, with workers clambering across the wreckage of Clone Wars-era ships with little if any safety gear whatsoever. Apparently, the poor safety conditions are something deliberately enforced by the Empire as punishment for the planet's support of the Separatists during the Clone Wars. After saving Prouf with the Force, the two discuss Cal's next move on the tram ride back. After a little chat, Cal shuts his eyes and dozes off. When he wakes up, he sees Prouf moving ahead through the crowd and tries to catch up with him. However, his grizzled older friend is one step ahead of them, disappearing through door after door to the tram cars ahead, seemingly unable to hear Cal calling out to him. But the creepy part comes in when Cal's fellow passengers start fading away, the lights start going out, and then, reaching one door, Cal can't get it open, so he turns around and suddenly he's not on the tram anymore. Wham shot. Now the cold, sterile walls of a Republic cruiser surround Cal, and as he tries to proceed down the hall, it extends in an unnatural way. Alarms begin blaring all around him, a door slides shut in front of him, and then it suddenly swings open, revealing his dead Jedi Master, who imparts him with a chilling message before he wakes up. Trust only in the Force. Rilla Siduri, aka the Second Sister, a mysterious high-ranking Inquisitor. Not that mysterious if you just give her name outright, but at first she wears a mask and doesn't even say anything, in contrast to how her fellow Inquisitors tend to give out pleasantries and chat it up with their victims. What is that? Faux affably evil. It makes her seem like an almost machine-like super persistent predator intently focused on hunting its prey. It isn't much better when the mask comes off. That just means you can see her sadistic smile as she closes in, clearly relishing the idea of slaughtering you and crushing the hope for future Jedi. When Cal seemingly makes a getaway on the Mantis, it doesn't stop the Second Sister from jumping onto the ship and dropping down to the windshield in a jump scare. While Grease tries to shake her off, she puts her hand on the glass and applies the Force. Cracks appear across the canopy beneath where her palm is. If they hadn't managed to shake her off in time. It feels like there being cracks on the window when they're going into space are still bad. The Purge Troopers. Since you can one-hit kill stormtroopers, the Empire compensates that weakness for these guys. They wear bulky armor, wield electro weapons that let them keep up with Jedi, and some of them actually enjoy it when their targets fight back. According to the lore, Purge Troopers are the last batch of the Jango Fett template clone troopers that are exclusively used by the Inquisition as largely disposable cannon fodder, bred for discipline and unquestioning, unthinkable loyalties to the Empire. The fact that the Inquisition uses the same type of clone trooper that originally carried out Order 66 to now exclusively hunt down Jedi is nightmarish all on its own, even without their elite status and fanaticism towards the Empire. And where is this lore? It's on the Star Wars wiki. Dang. If all the Imperials are trying to kill you on Kashyyyk weren't enough, there are also the giant enemy spiders known as Weeshocks. That also the wiki? Yeah. Lurking out there in the wilderness. Their fangs are bigger than your hands, and they like to pounce on their prey. You'll come across stormtroopers being massacred by them, or bodies webbed up in their spider gunk. The appropriately named Shadowlands are even worse! Nearly everything down there is hostile, from the aforementioned Weeshocks, acid-spewing ram slug crossbreeds known as Sligs. Is that the wiki too? Yeah. Giant carnivorous plants, and snake-like parasitic flowers. The fact that the place is incredibly dark most certainly doesn't help. Some areas require Cal to squeeze through some narrow gaps. Not fun if you're claustrophobic. Dathomir is back, and it's every bit as nightmarish as it was in Clone Wars. I had a feeling that planet was relevant from the way they talked about it. Among the beasts roaming the planet are dog-sized baneback spiders, ferocious nidax, and massive bats named pterodactyls. The few sentients around are either hostile Night Brothers or Talon Malicos, a dark Jedi who went a Terran Malicos, a dark Jedi who went mad due to his prolonged stay on the planet, since Dathomir is shrouded in the dark side. Oh, is that why the whole planet is tinted red? Even the weeds used for climbing look like they're made of blood or living organs. The tomb you visit on Dathomir is easily one of the creepiest locations in the game, with ominous red lightning and the petrified corpses of ancient Zepho you fused to the walls. The lore behind the place is no better, with the implication that the previously benevolent Zepho gradually fell into darkness and depravity, resulting in mass sacrifices of their own kind in a bid to obtain more power. I think Dathomir is about as far as I got when I was playing this game on the PS4, because I went to go check it out because I was told that's where the double-sided lightsaber was. I got stuck on a boss fight, and I think it was on Kashyyyk, and it made me rage quit and throw my controller, and then I gave up playing that game. I'm hoping playing it on a lower difficulty on the Xbox will let me get further, and I'm not really bothered by spoilers here because I honestly don't care. When Order 66 is executed, Cal is just a kid that, beforehand, had an almost brotherly relationship with the clones under Jaro's command, and in a blink of an eye, he and Jaro are betrayed by these troopers. On top of that, he ends up watching Jaro die trying to protect him, leaving him with survivor's guilt for at least 5 years. Poor kid needs therapy. The game brings the confusion, terror, and despair of Order 66 to life by placing you in Cal's position. The clones, your allies that you pal around with, make jokes with, and train with, all turn on you and try to kill you within seconds of receiving the order. Their attitude takes a complete 180 as they go from playful banter to murderous determination. The fact that the clones are voiced by D. Bradley Baker himself drives the knife even deeper. I didn't get to the point where that happened. I think it probably would have been right after the boss fight I got stuck on. When Cal finally unlocks the temple, he's suddenly treated to a vision of what could and likely would happen if he went through with the plan. It starts out well enough, with a group of younglings around him eager to learn, but it becomes pure adult fear from then on out. They're found by the Empire. We see younglings crawling through trenches trying to hide, a young Padawan ambushing stormtroopers and purge troopers before finally being cut down without mercy. The rest are left trapped in the Inquisitor's prison, terrified and begging for Cal to help. One is strapped to the torture chair, doubtless about to be brainwashed. It culminates in a vision of Cal himself in Inquisitor armor, red lightsaber in hand. Oh. We're treated to a first-person perspective of what Trilla went through at the Fortress Inquisitorius. She's helplessly strapped to a gurney, and all she can do is whimper as electric panels as big as her body are activated. Her anguished screams and sobs as the torturers get to work are nothing short of chilling. It's weird, like, in things like this game, or also in, Batman games, it's weird that the torture always seems to resort in Stockholm Syndrome and wanting to kill the people who they used to work for. Like, she gets tortured by these people and it basically breaks her brain to the point where she starts working to kill all the Jedi. And Jason Todd got tortured by the Joker, at least in Arkham Knight, to the point where he was all prepared to tell all the stuff he wanted to know about Batman, and he hated Batman, because like, why didn't you rescue me? I hate you, and Batman's like, I didn't even know you were alive! It always seems to do that. We hate you because we were tortured and now we want to kill you. Why didn't you save us? Because we thought we had already failed and spent years feeling like shit about it. But this is TVTropes, I shouldn't be surprised that that happened. The moment that segues into this flashback is a frightening presentation of gameplay and story integration as well. Cal manages to take Trilla's lightsaber from her, but touching it inadvertently triggers his psychometric abilities, which brings upon an unwanted force echo and allows Trilla to escape with the holocron. Cal is forced to experience Trilla's torture firsthand, which is bad enough, but the scene also brings about the uncomfortable awareness that Cal's power isn't always helpful or benign, and can in fact be dangerous for him, especially considering it seems to have activated unconsciously when he grabbed the weapon. Careful with that, it's been through hell! The final boss fight against Darth Vader himself. After cutting down the second sister for her failure, and casually tossing Seer aside, Cal finds himself completely outmatched against the Sith Lord, struggling just to stay alive as Vader overpowers him with both his lightsaber and the Force. Just as Vader's about to kill Cal, Seer returns and attacks. When Vader effortlessly bats her aside, Seer unleashes the dark side against him, and Vader is impressed by the depths of her fury and hate. Wowing Cthulhu. While Cal is able to talk her down, there's a brief look of utter horror on Seer's face as she comes back to herself and realizes what she was doing. Darth Vader, such hatred. You would have made an excellent Inquisitor. Yes, strong with the dark side. I can feel it inside. That's not a good Vader voice, but I don't have the respirator, so sue me. Don't sue me. His appearance in Endgame is full of this trope. Seer has seemingly gotten through to her fallen Padawan Trilla, who seems on the verge of letting go of her hatred for her former master, and then Trilla's face contorts into an expression of utter terror as that all too familiar rasping breathing comes from behind her. Reinforcing gameplay and story integration to a terrifying degree, the Sith Lord is completely unstoppable. Cal is so out of his depth that Vader doesn't even have a health bar. It takes everything Cal has to tear a generator out of the base, and it's barely even a distraction to the Dark Lord. Vader, meanwhile, tears the base to shreds with a mere thought and creates a flesh-it storm out of panels. And if you try to continue actually fighting him, he will kill you. Instantly. It goes to show why Vader was the Empire's primary enforcer. All Cal can do is run! Run or die. The very tactical guidelog for Vader is nightmare fuel. If you survive an encounter with the most powerful Sith in the galaxy, escape is the only chance for survival. Even worse is Vader literally ripping the base to shreds with the Force as Cal flees, regardless of any Imperial forces in the way. Every hope spot Cal gets to escape is brutally torn away. The door closing, he crushes it like a tin can. Cal is making a run to the elevator. The Sith Lord breaks the floor before he can even get close. Cal makes it to the elevator. Not only is Vader already across the gap himself, he's been there long enough to stop and stare at Cal. There's nothing Cal can do to even slow him down, much less stop him. Vader is in complete control the entire time, and appears to be intentionally toying with Cal just to terrorize the Jedi Knight. Made even worse by the scope for the scene. It's not the Imperial March as one might expect for an appearance by Vader, the score, rather. Nope, it's Anakin's dark deeds from Revenge of the Sith. The ominous Latin chanting cutting in the moment that Vader kills Trilla drives home how absolutely screwed you are. While the Imperial March would have given the sense that Cal was fighting a man, instead, you feel like he's fighting a nightmare. You would be wise to surrender. Yeah, probably. This is gonna suck. Facing the bullets one-liner. What does he say? Kneel before Zod. Vader's opening move is to grab Cal with the Force, drag him close, and then start using his signature move of throttling Cal with the Force. And this is shown from Cal's point of view, which gives the player the wonderfully terrifying view of Vader standing over them and saying one of several lines, with the most chilling simply being, "Submit." Equally terrifying is Vader's remark of, "feeble," showing just how outmatched Cal is against the Dark Lord. The Imperial March does kick in for one brief booming moment, Vader's jump scare, as detailed below. When Cal manages to lose Vader, he makes it back to the Imperial Fortress's exit, activates the doors, and barely manages to get his lightsaber drawn in time as Vader emerges, swinging for Cal's head. Vader sends both Cal and BD-1 flying, stops Cal from recovering his lightsaber with the Force, and, when Cal refuses to hand over the holocron, reactivates the blade and slowly drives it towards Cal's chest with the Force. The only reason Cal survives is because Seer reappears, forcing Vader to divide his attention. Foreshadowing-wise, the presence of Illume looking all too similar to Starkiller Base. Something about the faint outline of the trench running down the middle, coupled with the knowledge of what it will become, is spine-chilling. The Rise of Skywalker Visual Dictionary confirms that this isn't a coincidence either. Illume is Starkiller Base. What, the planet? Okay, next up we're going into, Solo. Okay, so looks like there is a separate Nightmare Fuel for Star Wars video games, but I'm just doing the Star Wars story, I guess? But next up is Solo. This might be a lighter and softer lower deck episode of the Star Wars saga, but that doesn't mean this entry is free from scares. Get out of here, advertisements of food when I haven't eaten yet. Rude. Okay, warning. Spoilers off applies to moments pages. Han is arrested for desertion and thrown by fellow mud troopers into a muddy cell/pit to be eaten or mauled to death by a humanoid beast, which turns out to be Chewbacca. Although he's always been one of the good guys, Chewie himself can be pretty frightening when enraged by something, as the Pike Sentinel that got his arms ripped off can attest. Chewie is thrown in a pit and forced to kill and eat other sapient beings to survive while the Mud Troopers laugh and cheer him on. The Millennium Falcon's crew has successfully evaded an Imperial Star Destroyer and a squadron of TIE fighters, only to bump into the Suma Verminoth, an enormous space cephalopod with countless tentacles. And the Suma Verminoth is possibly the most gigantic creature ever seen in a Star Wars movie, possibly bigger than the Exogorth space slug seen in The Empire Strikes Back. How does Han defeat this space monster? By tricking it into being sucked by them all, and we get to see it get ripped apart on screen. The scariest part of all this is the Suma Verminoth isn't just one roving monster in space, it's a member of a species. There is more of these things out there. The Maw itself, a black hole that disintegrates everything it pulls towards its core. The image of a Star Destroyer emerging from a nebula is as terrifying as it is awesome. Han gets captured by the White Worm Gang and is taken to their subterranean lair, where he meets their master, Lady Proxima, a horrific, slimy, worm-like Grindelid that emerges out of a pool of dark water. Watching her skin get burned by sunlight isn't a pretty sight either. Maul's appearance, looking both quite alive and very unhappy with the turn of events. And that's without the fact that was able to successfully create another powerful crime syndicate despite his first foray into building an underworld power base blowing up in his face. Okay. Wait, so Dathomir is the planet that Darth Maul is from, or is that just where he went? The Battle of Mimban rivals Rogue One in its depiction of war as hell, not the least because it kicks off with a jarring time skip. Without any warning or build-up, Han finds himself in a broiling, filthy hellhole of chaos and death. Men and vehicles are blasted apart mere feet away, the screams of wounded Imperials echo throughout the battlefield, multi-ton walkers are dropped from the sky with no apparent concern for the infantry below, a suffocating cloud of smog is smothering any clarity under a pall of confusion, and the muddy trenches look like they are straight out of World War I, which defiant war as hell in real life from much of the Western world. The entire battlefield, with its scorched landscape and fanatical commissars, is also very reminiscent of those in Spain, the Eastern Front of World War II, and the Korean War. It only lasts about 5 minutes, yet it's the most brutal and realistic war zone ever depicted in the Star Wars universe. Alden Ehrenreich also does a superb job of depicting how flat-out terrified Han is throughout the encounter. Han's immediate superior is gunned down while giving an order to charge, standing up tall and proud and silhouetting himself perfectly for the enemy. What's more frightening, a group of grunts bereft of their only leadership, or the fact that said leadership was so wildly incompetent. The situation off the battlefield isn't much safer, as any hint of desertion, disobedience, or disrespect will see you killed by your own men without court-martial. They won't even allow you the dignity of a firing squad, or even a quick shot to the head to end it quickly. You'll be dumped into a pit to be slowly and painfully clobbered to death by a hulking brute while sadistic MPs jeer at you from above. The whole premise wouldn't be out of place in Warhammer 40k. Dryden Voss. He's so creepy and affably evil, it's no wonder Beckett has reservations about double-crossing him or bailing on his job. The very first time we see him, he's yanking blades out of the chest of a hapless victim. He's also breathing deeply, even though he killed the man with little to no effort, implying that he really enjoyed the execution. A blink and you'll miss it moment, but some of Voss's servants are decraniated. Those background extras from the Jedi scenes in Rogue One that have had the top halves of their heads replaced with droid brains, and they're much easier to notice here despite Solo being a lighter-hearted film. According to Scum and Villainy, Dr. Evazan was previously employed by Crimson Dawn and made the decraniated as a money-making scheme, presumably as a cheaper to make alternative to fully built droids. Where Voss and Evazan got the original subjects is anyone's guess. Voss's relationship with Kira is obviously abusive. He tells Han, "I never ask for anything twice," and his charm is a quickly discarded disguise for a complete lack of empathy. Savareen, despite the beautiful landscape, seems very off. With the ramshackle settlements and ruins everywhere, the very tired and weary-looking populace, and the fact that none of the residents say a word. And as Enfys Nest heavily implies, there's a very good reason why. The whole populace of that settlement had their tongues cut off for resisting the efforts of a group of pirates. These same pirates would eventually form Crimson Dawn. Just like the Crimson Dawn, it's just the Crimson Dawn itself. Knowing Maul, what he's done to people who got in his way is likely pretty horrific. The Pike Syndicate mining droids, once their restraining bolts are gone, go bananas. Just how badly treated were they? The general portrayal of the Galactic Empire, which verges on fascist but inefficient here, and somehow it's even worse than the thought of it being completely invincible. For all their sheer military strength and the fear they project throughout the galaxy at large, Once you get past the propaganda, the ruling government of the galaxy is shockingly weak in places. Lady Proxima's henchmen on Corellia think nothing of busting through Imperial checkpoints and pushing stormtroopers around. There's a seemingly pointless military quagmire on Mimban led by officers who seem to be decidedly lacking in competence. Dryden Voss is introduced casually knifing a man the film's official guide reveals to be the governor of the expansion region. All Palpatine's rhetoric about a safe and secure society is truly exposed here. The lawful evil empire is really relatively impotent in the face of the chaotic evil of the underworld. Or, the empire doesn't actually care. As long as the criminals keep bringing resources and money in, an interpretation that came up several times in Legends, most notably with Shadows of the Empire. Okay, that brings us to the Star Wars Rebel TV show, but I could also just skip around to the movies. But I'm not going to do that. Let's go to Rebels. How long is this page? It doesn't look that long yet, but that's also because I haven't opened the folders! That makes more sense. Okay. Disney may be running the show now, but that hasn't made this galaxy any less scary. There's some things more frightening than death. Darth Vader, an unstoppable killer even when just toying with a pair of Jedi. Season 1. Droids in Distress. Introduces us to T7 ion disruptors, handheld rifles capable of taking down starships with only a few shots, but are said to have really horrific effects on living beings, most notably during the massacre of Zeb's homeworld, Lasan. This was enough for the Imperial Senate to make them illegal, but more immoral Imperials like Maketh Tua try to bring them back into circulation. We haven't seen what they can do to living beings yet, but carrying over from the Legends continuity, confirmed in the novelization of that episode, disruptors break living beings apart atom by atom, resulting in a slow, painful death. It's no wonder Zeb and the other surviving Lasats hate these guns, and Takatro's Vizago still has a few of them, but we may see what they can do later. Rise of the Old Masters. In Rise of the Old Masters, the corpse of Luminara Unduli is downright disturbing. Her nose and eyes appear to be gone, her face is very gaunt, and her facial bones are jutting out beneath her dried out skin. The way the skin is stretched out means her teeth visible even though her mouth is closed. Ew. If it wasn't for the chin tattoos, you couldn't even recognize her. I don't know who Luminara Unduli is, but it sounds like she's from Clone Wars? The build up to the revelation is also pretty creepy. Kanan could sense her presence in the spire, and he finds her sitting in her cell alive and well. Then she silently stands up, walks over, and phases into the casket, which is empty at first, before turning into the mummified corpse described above in a way that makes it look like she's quickly rotting away. A big yank the dog's chain moment, if any. And until a word of God weighed in, there was some speculation on what that image of Luminara sitting in the cell was? A hologram? Her spirit bound to her corpse, or an illusion created by the Inquisitor? And was Gal Travis, that supposedly sympathetic Imperial senator who protested her imprisonment on the Holonet, even aware of the trap being set up? According to an interview with Dave Filoni, it's a hologram. It became an interesting way to tell the story of what probably happened to some Jedi Knights, Jedi survivors. Order 66 didn't wipe them all out. Some of them were captured and probably executed later, which is what you see the holographic recording of. It's actually Luminara's execution in that chamber. Is Gal Travis a real person to begin with? The transmission did say he was a senator in exile, meaning he could just be a creation of the Empire to leak information they want to leak. Vision of Hope confirms him to be both a real person and an Imperial agent using his broadcast to lure rebel cells into traps. There is also a throwaway line during a HoloNet Brute News broadcast, the same one where the crew learns about Luminara, that mentions another successful planetary liberation through the Base Delta Zero initiative. In Legends, and this is confirmed to be canon from its description in Sabine My Rebel sketchbook, this is the Empire's phrase to describe wiping out everything on the planet's surface via orbital bombardment. As noted in Fridge Horror page, the key word is another. Well, Base Delta Zero is not simply a phrase, it's a unitary order to specifically command the complete incineration of a planetary surface, only given when actively intended to be carried out to avoid any form of confusion. Out of darkness. The Furnox, those creatures inhabiting the abandoned Clone Wars bases, sport an axis. Vicious, relentless, and strong enough to tear apart shuttles with ease. They live in darkness, and if you think you're safe just waiting outside the base, the asteroid they inhabit has a sun that's periodically blocked out by other asteroids. They're also willing to charge into a minefield of radonium canisters just to get a meal, and even that won't be enough to kill them all. And even though they're apparently nocturnal, they're smart enough to discern artificial light from natural light. According to the databank, they also reproduce very quickly. If you thought that was bad, gathering forces ups the ante. The Furnox may be trouble, but the big one living underground is a whole lot worse. When Ezra summons it out of anger, it even gives the Inquisitor chills. The lore behind Fort Anaxis. Before animatics of the Bad Batch arc were released to the public, we had very little context on what happened to the base, and Legends Anaxis was a loyal Imperial world that didn't get blown up. The concept art for this episode reveals it to be a reused asset from the Bad Batch, and the databank confirmed that the planet was destroyed in a cataclysm after the war. However, the last episode of the Bad Batch arc had the Separatists plant a bomb that could destroy the planet. That attempt was thwarted then, but it's very possible someone reactivated that bomb. Empire Day. What the Empire did to Sibo. He's so overwhelmed by the data in his head that he's basically an empty shell, spouting facts in response to stimuli. Sibo was a worst-case scenario, but it's clear that this happens to some degree to everyone with the implants. The Empire does this to low-level technicians just to make them a bit more efficient. What did they do? Unwilling robotification or whatever. Gathering forces. Ezra tapping into the dark side to summon the Furnock Mother. When you make the Inquisitor take a step back in fear, you know you're onto a winner. Ezra facing off with the Inquisitor and gathering forces. The Inquisitor has just knocked Kanan out without breaking a sweat. Ezra attempts to save Kanan only to get pushed back to the edge of a cliff. The Inquisitor slowly walks towards him, taunting him by stating that he'll kill Kanan and everyone else. The only thing that saves Ezra is tapping into the dark side, which is nightmare fuel on its own. It's worse because Ezra is so angry that he's in a kind of trance and has no real knowledge of the danger that the dark side of the Force possesses. Path of the Jedi. Ezra's visions of the Inquisitor killing his friends. The vision of Sabine's death is somewhat more brutal. While the slaughter takes place off-screen, judging from the sounds, Hera, Chopper, and Zeb die quickly, but there are several slashes between Hera's death and Sabine's, which suggests she's either managing to dodge away or the Inquisitor is merely toying with her for cruel amusement. All the while, she can be heard pleading with Ezra for help, and when the Inquisitor's blade finally hits, the blood-curdling scream she lets out sends a chill down the spine. Finally, when the Inquisitor emerges from the cabin after the massacre, all that can be seen of the crew is Sabine's prostrate legs, which evokes Jango Fett's fate and implies Sabine suffered the same. The corpses of the Masters. Not only are the bodies themselves disturbing, the reason they're here is that their Padawans went into the temple but never came out, and the Masters just sat there waiting until they died. Even though he was only a vision, the Inquisitor made himself out to be even more terrifying than he is in reality, although that's pretty much a rule with nightmares. And this brings up a new bit of horror in regards to Force hallucinations. It's noted that as long as Ezra was afraid of death, the vision of the Inquisitor could have actually killed him. So what happened to those Padawans that came before? They weren't killed by anything in the cave, they were killed by their own imagination, which means Luke could have been killed by his vision of Vader in the cave on Dagobah. Call to action. Grand Moff Tarkin. For starters, he reprimands Minister Tua and Agent Kallus for their repeated failures in containing the rebel cell, then turns on the Inquisitor for not being able to stop a single Jedi despite numerous chances. Then, he summons two high-ranking Lothal agents to discuss the latest activity, ending with him having the Inquisitor take their heads with his lightsaber, putting off Tua and Kallus. Finally, just look at how all three take this guy's criticisms. Tua is speechless and cannot talk her way out of it. Kallus holds his head in shame for being unable to do the job, while the Inquisitor is pissed. In short, Tarkin's appearance means shit just hit the fan. By the episode's ending, he has Kanan in custody, and his final line is, "You do not know what it takes to win a war, but I do." So Tarkin's modus operandi is making an example of them, which does not bode well for Kanan or Lothal. Isn't Grand Moff Tarkin the dude from The Mandalorian? They just call him the Moff there. What is the timing between those two shows? Rebel Resolve. Chopper exfiltrates itself from an Imperial transport by simply opening the nearest hatch and letting itself get sucked out into the rush of air. Never mind the squad of stormtroopers that just got spaced along with him. Word of God, tackling this very issue, admitted that while stormtroopers' armor can be hermetically sealed, the amount of air they would have had on them was negligible. Kanan's interrogation/torture session aboard Tarkin's Star Destroyer. If that wasn't bad enough, when he doesn't break, they intend to take him to Mustafar, which is described as where Jedi go to die. With the release of Rogue One, this line has a whole new meaning. Darth Vader's personal residence is located here, which Tarkin is certainly aware of, as director Krennic knows its location. So if Kanan doesn't break to the Grand Inquisitor, the Dark Lord of the Sith will certainly do the job with greater chances of success. Okay, so that was a dumb question about the Mandalorian thing, because if this takes place while Vader's still alive and Mandalorian takes place immediately after he's not, then that answers that question. So I guess Tarkin would have been younger here? This may explain why the Emperor's apprentice shows up nearly instantly with the Grand Moff at the end of the season when he returns from Mustafar. Fire across the galaxy. The Inquisitor would rather kill himself than report to Darth Vader that he had failed. Think about that. Keep in mind that he is most likely incinerated alive. Vader usually just chokes officers that fail him. What does he do to Inquisitors that makes burning alive preferable? Perhaps taking them to the Emperor, who's reputed to be even less forgiving than Vader. The rebels were having a hard time with the Inquisitor and Tarkin handling things. Now Lord Vader himself is handling the matter personally. He now provides the page image. The reveal of Darth Vader. The Emperor has sent an alternative solution. What could that be? Cue the most iconic breathing in cinema history. Season 2. Vader in his prime is a terrifying sight to behold. In trope term, he is a combination of genius bruiser, magic knight, implacable man, manipulative bastard, and the chess master. He was also a Knight of Cerberus on a higher caliber than even Tarkin. His list of achievements is in his first true appearance included planning the perfect trap to lure the rebels out, and then having them lead him back to the rebel fleet. First, he instilled such fear in Maketh Tua that she attempted to defect. Unfortunately for her, it was just as planned. Then he had her followed and killed and blamed it on the rebels, turning lawful against them. After raiding their hideout and destroying their transport, he planted a tracker on one of his own shuttles, correctly anticipating it would be the only way out. He then staged a massive firefight, even appeared in person to make their escape as believable as possible. When they got to the fleet, he folded alone in a single fighter and utterly decimated them. The only reason he didn't take them all and end the series right there were Hera's uncanny piloting skill and the Imperial's own incompetence. What's worse, they didn't stop him, only change his goals. He broke off the attack himself after discovering that Ahsoka was there. He soon makes it clear he wants to take her in alive. Besides his strategic mind, his combat skill, piloting skill, and mastery over the Force were no joke either. He easily overpowered Kanan and Ezra during a duel. Using one hand in a fight, he intentionally let them escape. He alone versus an entire rebel squadron and their ships. It's a curb stomp battle in his favor. Even though he was half machine, his mastery of the Force was still very powerful. He easily lifted the fallen walkers when they fell on top of him, and when Ahsoka attempted to read him through the Force, the backlash, along with the sheer horror at sensing exactly who he is/was enough to knock her out. When they attempted to escape after their initial confrontation, Sabine attempts to cover Kanan and Ezra by firing on Vader. He deflects both shots, and both of them end up hitting her. One in the shoulder, the other, her head. If she hadn't been wearing armor, she would have been killed. Vader's wham line when he realizes that Ahsoka is a part of the rebellion. The apprentice lives. While creepy on its own, Word of God would later drive it home even further by revealing that Vader wants to destroy anything and everything associated with his former life as Anakin. But there will not be any heartfelt reunion the next time the two meet. Let's see. That man is dead. The way Ezra described him and the way he referred to Anakin Skywalker as if they were different people, it was a glimpse of Vader's mind during his tenure as the terrifying Sith Lord. There's also Vader using the Force to almost have Ezra slice his own head off with his lightsaber. How Kanan and Ezra sense Vader's presence. They describe it as feeling a chilling cold, much in the same way Luke felt in the cave of Dagobah. For some reason, the idea that Vader just being within range of their senses results in causing Jedi to feel fear makes him even more unsettling. Vader chews out Tua for being unable to find the rebels, and she protests that she's just a public official, not a military commander. Vader replies that she can tell it to Tarkin the next day. As Tua got a front row seat to what happened when Tarkin was displeased with Oresco and Grint's failures, Tua knows exactly what this means. Kallus even takes a moment after Vader leaves to reassure Tua that they'll manage just fine in her absence. Emperor Palpatine's appearance. The room goes dark, Vader bows, and the only light is from Palpatine's hologram. All while his ominous, extremely foreboding theme, heavily employing a deep choir plays. And the echo of Sam Witwer's performance really sells it that we are seeing, well, kind of, an appearance from the franchise's literal incarnation of Satan for all effects and purposes. Wasn't Sam Witwer a Star Killer in The Force Unleashed? Or was that a different Sam? The first time Ezra and Sabine meet the seventh sister and the fifth brother is like something straight out of a horror movie. Creepy abandoned hospital? Check. Dark foreboding atmosphere complete with haunting music? Check. Two nigh unstoppable killers waiting in dark toying with them? Check. The whole be in the dark? There's a YouTube video of it. The seventh sister. She likes playing with her prey, tortures Ezra using the Force, and she'd have moved on to more physical methods if she had not been interrupted, and looks forward to torturing him and Sabine to death once they're of no further use. Not to mention her creepily intimate interactions with Ezra, who is 15! Her voice also has a rather unsettling reverb effect to it. In Always 2, there are, the fifth brother and seventh sister repeatedly threaten Ezra and Sabine with their lives if they do not give away important details. Ezra and Sabine are just children. Once we have the others, we'll dispose of them both. Very slowly. In the future of the Force, Palpatine is back to his old tricks concerning Force-sensitive children, except this time, he has a hell of a lot more resources to use with no need to be subtle and nobody to really stop him now. What's more, the Inquisitors use violence if the families of the children object, with no regard for collateral damage. And the kids will quite probably either be killed outright, experimented upon, or brought up as Inquisitors themselves. No bodies are shown, but it's heavily implied the Inquisitors killed everyone on the transport except the grandmother, and considering she's never seen again after Ahsoka finds her, she might well have died off-screen from her injuries. In the Rebels recon for the episode, when asked what could have happened to the children had the Inquisitors managed to hold on to them, Filoni says it's definitely not something he'd ever be able to show on Disney XD. The worst part is, this definitely isn't just one isolated incident. The Empire's been going strong for 15 years now! The Ghost Crew and Ahsoka saved 2 infants, but who knows how many babies have been already rounded up to have God knows what done to them. Ezra's roaring rampage of revenge and legacy is kind of disturbing when you think about it. He kills several stormtroopers, then charges full tilt towards fifth brother and seventh sister, yelling as he does so. No worries, he's just angry, right? Well, what side of the Force is anger a part of? The dark side. Remember how Ezra summoned the giant Furnock and gathering forces when he tapped into the dark side? Imagine what he will be capable of now, with his powers growing as they are. It should be noted that dark side is not actually anger or hatred, but passion. The most base and simple emotions like hatred and rage are some of the more passionate and raw emotions that allow a person to tap into the dark side easier, and single-minded passion is something that defines Ezra. In Legends, Concord Dawn was a sensibly habitable agricultural world. Here, you'll be wondering how exactly the Mandalorians were able to blow out almost an entire hemisphere of the planet. Okay, that's a picture. Dang. This is the result of hundreds of years of warfare for no reason beyond battle for battle's sake, long before the Death Star was made. Worse, since the Protector camp is based on one of the moons, it's pretty clear the planet itself is far from agriculture-friendly now. From a non-Mandalorian perspective, it's not hard to see why House Kryze tried to reform Mandalorian society into pacifist culture for a time after what happened to this planet. Towards the ending of The Call, Ezra falls from a platform into a crater filled with gas, which he can't breathe. His helmet falls off his head, and he lies on the back of a Purgil unconscious. When he finally wakes up, he quickly realizes that he's choking, and he reaches out for his helmet only for it to fall beyond his grasp. If the Purgil hadn't caught the helmet and returned it to him, he'd have suffocated and died. Not pleasant to think about. When arriving on Geonosis and the Honorable Ones, the crew was under the impression that the Geonosians are building new weapons for the Empire. Then they scan the planet and find no signs of life. What's more, it's implied in the episode and confirmed in Rebels Recon that Ezra can sense the death from orbit. They're dead. All of them. The reason why they're all dead is a continuity nod to the Star Wars Darth Vader series, which occurs about 4 years later, where it's stated that they were wiped out in an act of genocide to keep the Death Star a secret. Yes, the Emperor is so monstrous that he pulled a case of "you have outlived your usefulness" trope on an entire species of his own allies just to cover his tracks. The Bonzami, the creatures Zeb and Kalos encounter on the Genoshan moon, are large creatures with pickaxe-shaped heads that possess more teeth than the Osmond family, and, for added fun, they're immune to bullets. Hope you don't have arachnophobia, because if you do, Mystery of Chopper Base will terrify you, courtesy of the Krykna. Even if you don't, the episode is incredibly unsettling. The Krykna can appear out of nowhere, are nearly impervious to blaster fire, and drag their prey into their underground lairs, which are dark and full of gross, slimy eggs. Remember Driver, the first rebel who encountered these creatures, who the main crew were also searching for in those tunnels? She was never seen again for the rest of that episode. It's very likely that she was killed off screen. Twilight of the Apprentice. The new Inquisitor waits in the shadows, blending in with the petrified corpse statues before he strikes. The ancient Sith temple has dozens, more likely hundreds, of these petrified corpses on and around the pyramid, remnants of an ancient battle between the Jedi and the Sith. Ezra, on the orders of Maul, is tricked into activating an ancient Sith superweapon. When he tells it doesn't want to destroy any particular planet, it says that maybe the person coming up will want to use its power. Ezra runs to warn Ahsoka and Kanan about Maul's deception, only to find the person coming is Darth Vader. Maul strikes Kanan's eyes with his lightsaber, permanently blinding him. They even show the aftermath shown in a blink and you'll miss it form. Check that out. Zoinks, you've taken a wrong turn. Guess I don't get to see that. Thanks, Imgur. Maul in general, after his defeat by Palpatine, Maul has learned the arts of subtlety and deception, but lost little of his trademark savagery. Maul has the Seventh Sister trapped in a force choke and orders Ezra to kill her. When he refuses, the Seventh Sister expression relaxes a bit, obviously thinking of a way out of her predicament. Unfortunately for her, Maul is far less merciful and throws his lightsaber. He barely even has time to scream in horror before she's cut in half, with the camera showing only her clearly severed lower torso hitting the ground and falling over. During Ahsoka's duel with Vader, part of Vader's helmet gets cut open so that when he turns his head to look at Ahsoka, she and the viewer can see just a part of his face beneath the mask, including the piercing Sith yellow eye. To add to the horror, Vader calls out to Ahsoka with a twisted mishmash of Anakin's voice and Vader's artificial one. Honestly, hearing Vader speaking in Anakin's voice with his face partially visible while still acting like Vader only makes him even scarier. At least before he had the armor and altered voice to keep us from entirely identifying with him. Now we can see that this is the Anakin we spent the entirety of the Clone Wars following and rooting for, now a fallen hero and the dragon to the big bad who wiped out the majority of the Jedi. I won't leave you, not this time! Then you will die. What really sells the moment is the soft music. That horn in the background just sounds sad. Ahsoka calmly delving deeper into the Sith Temple on Malachor after her battle with Vader. What could possibly drive her to do that? Vader force dragging Ezra towards him by the arm holding the holocron, all while Ezra is panicking and scrabbling on his feet, with Kanan desperately trying to hang on to him. Ahsoka and Kanan dismiss the Sith holocron as useless, as no Jedi will be able to open it. At the very end of the episode, the Sith holocron begins to open in Ezra's hands while he looks up at the camera with a look of pure rage, the red light of the hologram reflected in his eyes as he does so. Ezra's going into a bad place. So, Season 3. Season 2 got dark when Darth Vader joined the party. How do you top that? Grand Admiral Thrawn, that's how! For those who don't know who Grand Admiral Thrawn is, he's a cold, calculating, strategic genius who nearly brought the newly formed New Republic to its knees. His specialty is goading his opponents into traps, understanding a species and their future actions just by learning its culture, and being such a big fan of art that he didn't deny how beautiful his own assassination was. All in all, not someone you'd want as an enemy. Hera is shown looking very nervous in Thrawn's presence, who plans to turn the rebels against each other and let them destroy themselves. Hera is essentially the heart of the Ghost Crew. Kill, damage, or corrupt the heart, and the body will soon follow. Ezra's trembling voice at the end of the Celebration trailer as he mutters, "The key to destroying the Sith," isn't exactly soothing. The trailer features shrieking skeletal spirits bound to a table with runes on it. At one point, one of them caresses Kanan's face and then possesses him, using his body to fight Darth Maul. Seeing Kanan grinning creepily as he steps off the table, his ruined eye sockets filled with green ichor, is what nightmares are made of. And then it turns out, Kanan isn't the only one subjected to this demonic possession. One teaser shows Maul getting it, and so do Sabine and Ezra in the Rebel Beat commercial, and the spirits are making them fight each other. In the mid-season trailer, Thrawn has found Chopper Base. And we see scenes in the trailer of Adelon being destroyed and what seems to be Base Delta Zero, which was long foreshadowed back in Season 1, with only the shield generator, or as some speculate, the Bendu's powers holding off the Imperials long enough for the rebels to flee, protecting Chopper Base. But for how long? Practically everything about the mid-season trailer is unnerving. While scenes are shown briefly covering how things are taking a turn for the worse for the rebels, the ominous repetition of Obi-Wan's warning plays across the trailer, giving a much darker and uneasy tone to the short moments as they play out. There might also be something disturbingly hidden. The faint-sounding noise heard at the end is actually Maul shrieking, "Kenobi!" as they prepare to duel in Tatooine. Steps into Shadow. The episode really establishes the dark effects the Sith holocron from Twilight of the Princess has had on Ezra. He's gone from being Kanan's go-lucky, if somewhat jaded, and smooth apprentice, to a hot-headed, paranoid, angsty cynic. The focus of the episode is not establishing the new characters, but rather making it clear just how close Ezra is to falling to the dark side. In the time skip, Ezra has become extremely ruthless and vicious in battle. With his quick shots on a new DL-44, he's got a bit of Han Solo, but with his flurry of lightsabers attacks, he unnervingly resembles Maul. Hondo was unnerved by the change in his young friend and asked quite nervously, "Is that really Ezra?" in an utterly serious tone of voice. Sabine indicates that's how Ezra is now most of the time. Some also have noticed that the pattern on Ezra's clothes invoke those on Clone Wars era Anakin's, and we've seen how Anakin's own struggle with darkness ended up. Some have compared his new haircut to that of Galen Starkiller Merrick. Everything about the scene with Ezra and the Imperial Stormtrooper Walker Looper which is likely one of the darkest moments in the show. First, Hondo's associate Turba decides to bail on him and the gang, and flees outside to what he believes is freedom, until he sees an ATST waiting for him, and he's blown to hell by the Imperial Walker. The group is then pinned down by the same Walker. Ezra takes control of the Walker pilot's mind with the Force, and makes him fire on the stormtroopers, and then step off the platform into his unambiguous death. Scary enough, but the way Ezra's movements mirror that of the pilot show that it's less of a Jedi mind trick, and more like people puppets, or maybe even outright possession. It's basically the Force equivalent of bloodbending, and the others are visibly shaken by it. When did Kanan teach you that? He didn't. It's even worse when you think about it from the pilot's point of view. Imagine a routine day on the job shooting at members of a small rebel cell, or what you believe to be one. Suddenly you get utterly stripped of your will and manipulated like a puppet into shooting your friends while they scream for you to stop. After that, you die. How do you die? You tumble through the clouds, probably just now becoming aware of yourself and your surroundings again, before you inevitably smash into the ground. It's a serious cross between these three tropes, and with the worst possible outcome. Also, the music that plays when he starts using the Force on the pilot starts as the original triumphant Force theme, only for it to twist into something far darker as the pilot gets controlled. Possibly tying in with Grand Admiral Thrawn's introduction in the same episode, but the technique Urza used on the Walker's pilot is exactly the kind of thing Joruus C'baoth was famous for. The chilling way Ezra tells Sabine to deal with the Mining Guild shuttle, which is technically an unarmed civilian ship. We're not leaving any witnesses. Do you remember those lovely, adorable spiders who provided so many entries on this page during the second season? Kanan blunders right into one while blind and at their mercy. The revelation that Thrawn was promoted after his victory at Baton? Which has more civilian casualties than insurgent deaths. The fact that not only is Thrawn willing to go to such lengths, the Empire has no problem encouraging such things is kind of frightening. Such is the way of totalitarian dictatorships. As shown in his book, Thrawn didn't cause those civilian casualties. The casualties were actually caused by Governor Price, when she detonated a cache of explosives located under a shield protecting the settlement where the insurgents were hiding. Because of the shield, the shockwave of the explosion rebounds and hits the settlement again and again, obliterating it. All this just to cover up her murder of an Imperial agent, and she lets Thrawn take the credit/blame. The fact that this level of civilian casualties is considered acceptable is rather disturbing. Note that it is Price who defends the casualties as justified, not Thrawn. The holocrons of fate. Darth Maul has captured Hera, Sabine, Zeb, and Chopper and is holding them hostage, tied up with blasters to their heads and threatening to kill them if Ezra and Kanan don't cooperate. And then there is Maul probing Hera's mind for information, doing it the same way that Kylo Ren does. Hera isn't as much pain throughout as Poe was, but it remains an unpleasant process. After Ezra and Kanan arrive at the station, Maul has two droids take Ezra to a place where they can fuse the holocrons, while he takes Kanan to an airlock which he then throws the hatless Jedi out of. While Kanan survives being thrown into space, he ends up being almost frozen and is gasping for breath by the time he gets back to the station. Near the end of the episode, while Ezra looks away from the holocrons, Maul has a full view of them just as they explode. Immediately after, he disregards the entire Ghost crew and just hastily stumbles his way out of the station into his ship and flies away, cackling maniacally and saying, "He lives!" over and over again. Just who is he so eager to meet? And earlier in the episode, the Bendu states once a secret is known, it cannot be unknown. Seeing how unhinged Maul seemed after the explosion and how he didn't turn away, he may have very well gone insane. What makes the whole thing worse is that the holocrons never finished the revelation, with Ezra having cut off the connection before they could find the full answer. Given how badly just fragments of that knowledge hurt Ezra and Maul, what could have happened if they had found what they were looking for? When Kanan and Ezra find the Sith holocron in the Krykna nest, the spiders are all piled up in a contorted, painful-looking mess with the holocron sitting innocuously on top. When the holocron starts to move, the group moves with it, almost like it was a being itself, before the holocron moves far enough away that they separate and go back to normal. Words don't do justice to just how eerie it looks, and it makes you wonder what exactly the Sith holocron was doing to them. The Antilles extraction. Cadets going through a simulation where the commanding officer orders to fire on an unarmed civilian vessel. It's no wonder Thrawn was promoted after Bataan. The Empire doesn't care who dies or who lives so long as the military stays loyal. Even worse, they actually want pilots who are okay with the just following orders mentality. Hera's heroes. Hera pretends that she's an ordinary Twi'lek servant when she gets caught in a doorway by Thrawn and an Imperial officer. And Thrawn being Thrawn, it definitely didn't get past it. Thrawn appears to have taken a close interest in Hera. Thrawn's final line in the episode sheds some light on in how he defeats his opponent. Fail first, then succeed. I found this whole experience to be very enlightening. It's worse than that. Thrawn isn't like other Imperial higher-ups. While they are quick to action and enjoy short successes, he is patient. He's willing to let small failures go for the bigger picture. He's willing to put other lives on the line just so he can learn. Thrawn is pretty much a sociopath in charge of an entire Imperial fleet. Thrawn's perpetual serenity is creepy enough. Thrawn going from serene to enraged and right back on a dime is even more so. Judging by his reaction, he probably could and would have killed Slavin on the spot had he not collected his thoughts. Whatever you do, don't threaten art around Thrawn. Thrawn's leitmotif, Thrawn's Web, is both this and awesome music. The piece played in the episode begins on an elegant and oddly serene tune, almost fringing on the ominous music box tune. Then the ominous pipe organ begins, emphasizing the fact that despite his externally affable demeanor, Thrawn is a very dangerous tactician and a no-nonsense nemesis, which is followed up by an eerie mixture of both Thrawn's Web and the Imperial March. The last battle. Rex is clearly on the verge of a PTSD flashback when he awakens to find himself captured and surrounded by battle droids, which as a clone, or any soldier in general, is the last thing you want, though it isn't a rarity, when you're in enemy territory in a war zone. He even calls out for Cody, mistaking Kanan's voice for his, doubles as a tearjerker. The full reality of what happened to the clones hits hard this episode. Even without a chip to render him incapable of defying orders, Rex was still molded from birth to be a soldier and is compelled to go into battle because he was taught there was no other way to live. The worst part is Rex seems aware of this, calling it his programming, but war is so much a part of him that he can't give it up. Imperial Super Commandos. The idea that not only is Sabine's family fighting the other side of a war from her, but that her mother is with the Empire and possibly now hostile to her daughter is adult fear mixed with nightmare fuel. Gar Saxon threatening to shoot Chopper to get Ezra to talk. Not to mention how rough he is with Ezra himself towards the end, outright flinging the boy across the room. An inside man. Thrawn engineers Mr. Samar's death when his hover bike overheats to enforce the fact that sabotage will not be tolerated. Ezra and Kanan have to watch their friend be violently killed, unable to help for fear of breaking their own cover. Even Kallus is shocked and horrified by Mr. Sumar's death. Not surprising considering his first unit was killed in a similar manner. Kallus is the new Fulcrum, and Thrawn quite possibly knows this. I don't know what Fulcrum is. Visions and voices. Ezra's first visions of Maul, who appears at the edge of his vision before quickly disappearing, with Maul's voice saying his name in an extremely creepy way, and it culminates with Maul appearing right behind him, screaming right in his face. The whole scene plays out like a horror movie, with erratic camera movements, eerie, stormy atmosphere, creepy music, sounds starting to echo, and Maul looking right at the camera, his face shadowed and his eyes glowing like some sort of demon specter from hell. Where else would demon specters be from? Kanan and Ezra go to see Bendu in an attempt to try and solve Ezra's issues. When Bendu asks what Ezra wants, he replies he wants to stop seeing Maul. Then don't turn around. Of course they do, and complete with a scare cord, find Maul only a short way off, staring coldly at them. Ezra seeing a rebel soldier as Maul and attacking him. He comes within a hair's breadth of killing the guy before Kanan manages to snap him out of it. Maul's been busy since his last appearance setting up a hideout which includes such wonderful details as Kenobi written on the wall in blood, a pseudo-shrine to Satine with her throat slit, and a collage of crude cryptic drawings covering the walls, all tied to Kenobi in red lines. When Sabine's possessed by a Night Sister ghost and stalking Ezra through the caverns, she crawls along the wall in a way no human should be capable of, more like a lizard or spider than anything else. Kanan and Sabine being possessed is disturbing enough. The possessed Sabine talking is creepy, but possessed Kanan talking is far, far worse due to the sheer dissonance between his actual speaking voice and the voice of the Night Sister's ghost. For reference, only Darth Vader and the Bendu have deeper voices than he does, and the Night Sister's voice is quite high-pitched and scratchy, resulting in a very disturbing scene. The entire episode, from the beginning with Ezra having, they spelled it Urza this time, Ezra having waking hallucinations of Maul, to Maul actually showing up, to Maul and Ezra going into a cave on Dathomir filled with Maul's creepy collection, to them drinking an unidentified liquid and having green smoke come out of their eyes, to the Night Sister ghosts, looking like green smoky zombies chasing them, culminating in Sabine and Ezra. Is it Urza or Ezra? Being possessed and stalking Ezra. Stalking Ezra with glowing green eyes, unnatural, jerky, and insect-like movements, and creepy voices. The episode is non-stop nightmare fuel. Seriously, don't watch this before bed. Ghost of Geonosis. The Empire had wiped out all Geonosians save for one, and a queen egg for reasons unknown to our heroes, save that they were building something. It just shows how far they were willing to go to keep secrets hidden from the galaxy. When Click-Clack is questioned what he and the other Geonosians were building for the Empire, he responds by drawing a circle within a circle. During the journey deeper into Geonosis, the heroes assume he was either drawing the planet's rings, the queen's egg, or the bioweapon canisters the Empire used to kill his kind. Of course, we know what he really meant. The Warhead. The Imperial Recon, I almost said raccoon, recon droid that infiltrates Shopper Base. At first it looks like a normal droid, not unlike C-3PO. Then as AP-5 casually talks to it, it hears the word rebels, and suddenly starts repeating the words over and over again before identifying the base. It then transforms into a very freaky-looking multi-eyed droid with creepy long fingers that immediately attacks Zeb, Chopper, and AP-5 with eerily smooth movements, such as running extremely quickly and jumping extremely high, all while producing a guttural laughing sound. Yeesh! Zeb reprograms the droid so that when it returns to the Star Destroyer it was sent from, it self-destructs, taking out not only the two techs examining it, but quite a lot of the Star Destroyer as well. Zeb caused the deaths of who knows how many thousands of people. What's more, Thrawn is able to take this disaster and coldly analyze it. Now he knows to look for rebel cells on the planets to which those droids were sent. The fact that most violence in the episode is directed towards droids allows for some quite graphic imagery, even for this show. EXD's hand getting severed with fluid leaking out of it is just one good example, as EXD disemboweling a gong droid for parts while it's still awake. And there is no just a machine excuse here, as two of the main characters are droids themselves. Trials of the Darksaber. Mixed with Tearjerker, Sabine's backstory while she was at the Academy is finally explained. She was helping the Empire develop weapons which they used to coerce her family and friends to bow to them, and when she spoke out against this, her family turned away from her. Sabine mentions having seen them used on her loved ones, and from other episodes we know she barely escaped being killed herself after her family abandoned her to her fate. She was 15 at best during all this, probably even younger. Through Imperial eyes. Thrawn continues to show an uncanny ability to show up exactly when and where the rebels are planning to move. Thrawn's elite Mook, implacable man droid he spars with. Even the Admiral himself evokes a bit of, oh crap, when they suddenly break into his office, manhandle his stormtrooper escort, come after him next, and refuse to obey his verbal override anymore. All courtesy of Callus. Even worse, this is a mythology gag to his final fate in Legends, being killed in the back by bodyguard Rook, whose name is the aforementioned override here. Continuing the trend from an inside man, the Imperials are becoming better and better at preventing rebel infiltration of their ranks. Ezra's Trojan prisoner gambit fails when he's immediately taken to Thrawn's Star Destroyer for questioning, and Kanan and Rex's attempt to board the Chimera using a stolen shuttle and stormtrooper armor barely lasts a minute before they are found out by Governor Price and fired upon. If not for Callus, their mission to hack Thrawn's database would have failed. It shows just how effective the Imperial military could be with competent leadership, and how much tougher the Rebels' operations will be moving forward. Twin Sons. As he obsessively searches the boundless desert for Obi-Wan, Maul is reduced to muttering to himself before shrieking his quarry's name to the sky, clearly on the verge of losing what's left of his mind. Ezra, Chopper, and Maul all find themselves dealing with the unpleasant reality of crossing the desert without food or water. Aside from Ezra's brief encounter with a few sand people, none of them are fighting any enemy aside from the endless sands and implacable sun. Before long, Maul has gone even more insane. Chopper is forced to shut down while Ezra begs him to stay, and Ezra eventually passes out. If Ben Kenobi hadn't found Ezra, Ezra would have died, and Maul would likely have spent what was left of his life searching in vain. Maul sports a wide smile as he cuts down several Tusken Raiders. The Tuskens let out a scream of terror at the sight of him, no doubt having knowledge of the last time a man with a lightsaber attacked some of their people, though Maul's demonic appearance can't have helped matters. Maul and Obi-Wan's final confrontation has them throwing taunts and jabs at each other one last time, with Obi-Wan gently trying to convince Maul to stand down and leave. However, Obi-Wan slowly realizes that this isn't an option, as Maul confirms he knows about Luke. Adult fear kicks in and Obi-Wan stops playing around and draws his lightsaber with every intention to kill. 0 Hour. Pre-release information shows that Callus tried to desert, but he still ends up in Imperial custody while flanked by Death Troopers that could kill him the second Thrawn hands out the order. But Thrawn wants him to watch the rebels on Atoll burn. And if you look closely, he's bleeding, meaning that either he was beat up by the Death Troopers or subject to cold-blooded torture. Imagine being trapped on your small military base because you're cornered by about more than a few enemy cruisers than your defense can handle. If there's no cavalry coming to help you, you're as good as dead. We get to see a near POV from Wedge and Hera as Imperial ships rain death from above on Chopper Base, and at any moment, that shield might give way. Worse, as we find out, Kanan can't make it back to the base in time. Luckily, he survives. The score used, a variant of Thrawn's theme, is hauntingly beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Despite knowing many of the main characters have plot armor, you get the feeling that Thrawn is about to annihilate them all just with a single attack. Ever wonder what happens to a physical god that desires to be neutral in all things and refuses to fight for either side when you piss it off? The Bendu shows everyone on Atoll exactly what he is, a force of nature that has the power to dole out death to anyone he sees fit, and there is nothing you can do to stop him. Likewise, Thrawn eventually manages to attack its weak point and incapacitate the Bendu, even if it was very temporary, without any Salamiri, no less. This guy is officially capable of did you just punch out Cthulhu, thus giving the rebels even more reason to see him as the dreaded. The Bendu cryptically foretells Thrawn's defeat, and Thrawn himself appears unnerved. He shoots the Bendu only for the Great Bane to disappear with a disembodied laugh, leaving Thrawn just as spooked as we are. And now we're at Season 4. In general, the Rebels recon for 0 Hour gives us a piece of concept art showing the helmets of Clan Ren, a Protector, and a Night Owl, quite possibly Raoul's and Bo-Katan's, though luckily none appear to be any of the main Wrens, littered across a scorched and smoking landscape like skulls, yet there are no bodies around. The second trailer gives a good reason for that, an ATDP armed with a lightning gun that can burn a Mandalorian to ash right through their armor. Is this one of those weapons Sabine made for the Empire? Upon further inspection, the Night Owl helmet does not seem to be Bo-Katan's, judging by the color scheme. As for the Protector helmet, maybe Rao isn't the only one with that set of armor, but there's only one female Clan Ren helmet out of all of them. Let's hope it isn't Sabine. You guys remember the Nogri Death Commandos from Legends? Guess what? They're back. To make matters worse, Ruck has returned to canon. The mid-season trailer reveals that eventually, Ezra will have to confront Palpatine himself. And Palpatine has taken an interest in him for whatever reason. If you thought Maul was bad, this is 1,000 times worse. Heroes of Mandalore. Sabine's super weapon burns Mandalorians to death by superheating their armor, leaving nothing but piles of ash. And yes, we see this happen on screen. What's worse is that the weapon isn't operating at its full capacity. At full power, it would affect an entire army, leaving the Mandalorians completely helpless. Thrawn's speech on the artistry of the anti-Mandalorian weapon, how beautiful it is that it turns strength armor into a crippling weakness and turns the Mandalorian culture, where they can't abandon or replace their armor, against them. Suddenly Thrawn sounds a lot less like a military strategist and more like a mad artist whose canvas is war. Sabine sets the weapon against Stormtrooper armor, incapacitating the base and gloating over Tiber as he writhes in pain, and then declares her intentions to take the weapon for herself and turn it against the Empire. It's definitely a case of kick the son of a bitch, and Bo-Katan manages to talk her down from keeping it, but it's a good reminder that she designed such a terrible weapon in the first place and has a very dark side no matter how well she hides it. To make matters worse, there's also the fact that Sabine unknowingly put Ezra in danger by losing herself due to him wearing a Scout Trooper helmet. It carries the implication that if Sabine set the weapon to lethal capacity, Ezra's head would have been vaporized before he could react, and it wouldn't be a pretty picture. The occupation. Most of Lothal had been burnt to the ground. It is unknown what could have done it, but seeing we had the Death Star at its lowest setting and Operation Cinder, what the Empire had might have been equally as bad. Lothal has gone from a poor world with bullying police to a nightmarish totalitarian regime. No one is wandering the streets anymore. Ads have all been replaced with floating speakers chanting, "Serve your empire, stamp out the rebellion, loyalty is obedience," and other phrases over and over. And pollution is so extensive that it seems like the middle of the night even though it's actually noon. All of the things that gave Jothal personality are gone in favor of gray buildings with smooth lines and no distinguishing features, and if it weren't for the occasional light from a house, you'd think the town was all abandoned altogether. The worst part? This isn't the final stage of the Empire's plans. Crawler Commanders. The fight between Ezra and the short and scrawny, but deceptively dangerous Trandoshan Ore Crawler Commander ends with the latter tumbling backwards into a smelting pit full of glowing hot molten metal, and judging by the screams, his death was not instant. Not to mention that when the giant ore press continues pounding up and down afterwards, the pounding sounds squishier than it did seconds earlier. Arguably more disturbing than even the death itself is Ezra's nonchalant, sardonic reaction to it, which hints at some persisting flirtation with the dark side on his part. There's even some ambiguity as to whether Ezra himself might have caused it to occur by subtly using the Force to shift his dropped lightsaber to a position that caused Seaver to trip and fall into the pit. Jedi Knight. Price's cold-blooded torture of Hera is likely one of the darkest scenes in the show. The whole scene is portrayed very realistically and pulls no punches in showing just how much pain Hera is in and how nasty Price really is. Hera is seen being strapped to the table and repeatedly electrocuted as she screams in pain, while Price gleefully smiles, doubles down on the torture, and responds to her screams by complimenting the sound of her voice. It's no wonder that along with Kanan's death, this episode is what cemented Price as one of the most hated characters of the show among the fandom. It gets even worse when you realize that Hera was pregnant the whole time. Thrawn then arrives and rubs Hera's brother's death into her face, which must have been a horrible experience from her. Then Price uses a droid with a sharp needle-like syringe to inject truth serum into Hera's neck, and unlike the scene with Leia in A New Hope, the scene does not cut away, with only the droid itself blocking the side of the serum being inserted into Hera's neck. Kanan's death, while both tear-jerking and visually stunning, is also rather nightmarish with the hellish landscape of the burning fuel station surrounding him. Not to mention that Kanan died by being consumed by a huge wave of fire, which is not a pretty way to go. Doom. Ezra is terrified of the Loth Wolves, which make no attempt to seem friendly towards him this time around. The giant one in particular gets a lovely shot of it snapping at the camera as though intending to bite Ezra in half. Not to mention how fundamentally wrong it looks when it's talking. In the aftermath of Kanan's death, Governor Price tries to cover up the destruction of the TIE Defender production line with a parade celebrating her victory over the rebels. Thrawn, of course, is not fooled for an instant and is probably the most angry we've ever seen him, hissing a statement, not a threat, that can only be described as certain doom in words. The sheer menace and anger Lars Mikkelsen is able to portray in so few words as he explains to her exactly how she gave the rebels a victory and compromised the Defender project is absolutely terrifying, and he never raises his voice. "I will deal with you when I return, Governor." Of course, what is Tarkin going to do to Thrawn if he finds out about this? Knowing Tarkin since a call to action, he will likely give Thrawn anything worse than you can imagine. Tarkin may not have to do anything. Given that he arranged a meeting with the Emperor and Thrawn, he will likely leave Thrawn to the Emperor's wrath, which, as we know, means Thrawn is fucked. That is, if Thrawn is held accountable for the TIE Defender project being compromised, which isn't actually too likely, especially since this isn't the first time she's screwed up on her own or Thrawn's plans. It's much more likely that Price will be held responsible and that she will be punished instead of Thrawn, which adds an unhealthy heaping of fridge horror when you realize If the reporting really goes that far up on the chain of command, that her actions may have just brought down the wrath of Thrawn, Tarkin, and Palpatine on her head. It's also worth noting that Thrawn had already had Hera's leverage to save face with the Emperor when his TIE Defender project was at risk of losing support, so yes, definitely Price is the only one in trouble. Wolves and a door. The look of utter terror on Ezra and Sabine's face when they hack into Minister Hyten's transmission to Coruscant and realize he's talking to Emperor Palpatine himself. A world between worlds. Palpatine's one-sided confrontation with Ezra and Ahsoka within the eponymous Eldritch location. Both lightsabers are horrifically outmatched and can do nothing but run as the Emperor attacks them with some form of Sith sorcery, cackling and snarling as only Ian McDiarmid can. At one point, he actually does grab hold of Ezra, and for a split second his hand passes through the portal until Ahsoka manages to break the connection. He became terrifyingly close to seizing the power to rule all time and space and becoming a physical god in his own right. One that's only clear on repeated viewings. The first word he says is not Palpatine's voice, but Kanan's, grossly distorted. Ezra seeing Kanan in the portal was an illusion, and had he followed through, he'd probably have pulled Palpatine right through the gateway. It's just as scary that Ezra can hear the past, present, and future. Remember back when Ezra said that he is afraid of the truth? Well, he found out a lot of hard truths, even if he can't quite make sense of them. Ezra's not the only one who knows Ahsoka isn't dead, but so does Emperor Palpatine. Ahsoka might have evaded his radar for now by going back to the past, but she's still in danger of being hunted by Sidious. It's only a matter of time until he's able to sense her again. Now, Palpatine has been seeking Ezra, and the terrifying part, he knew who Ezra really is enough to single him out. How long has he been keeping watch of Ezra and or Kanan? A fool's hope. The Loth Wolves are back, and going as close as the sensors will allow to tear squads of stormtroopers apart, to the point that they're able to get a lot more action in. At one point, we see two of them grab a single stormtrooper and start pulling. Sure, they're on the side of the heroes, but Savage Wolves is a trope for a reason. Even though she survives, Price is utterly traumatized by the wolves after the battle is through. Family reunion and farewell. Palpatine's glamour of his Clone Wars era self is deeply disturbing. He's also garbed in pure white robes and is really playing up the kind old man act, which is a jarring contrast with the monster we know he really is. Even in-universe, this catches Ezra off guard. Remember what the Bendu said to Thrawn? Turns out the many hands referred to Purgil tentacles crushing him, while the cold embrace was hyperspace after the Purgil sped off with the Chimera's hull breached. Not a good way to go. However, Word of God has stated that Thrawn is still alive. Hey, Bendu did say defeat, not death. The Mandalorian confirms that Ahsoka is tracking Thrawn's location, meaning he's still alive. I thought Thrawn was the dude that was on the Death Star when it blew up. Was that somebody else? I don't know. But anyway, I'm gonna cut this video here because last time I had it run an hour and a half and then the audio files freaked out. It's already over an hour and I'm not looking to have that happen again. So in the next video of this, we'll be going over Rogue One. I'm just clicking it now so that I already have it open. How long is this page? Open the folders. It's not super long, but I'm still gonna wait. So this has been Anashi Sasuke. This was the second Star Wars episode of Reading Nightmare Fuel on TVTropes. If you liked it, a like and a subscribe would be groovy. If you didn't, you don't need to do either one of those things. If you want to click the bell, you can do that as well so that you're notified of future uploads. And I'll see y'all in the next one. Later!